Welcome dear learners. Welcome to Residential Design Lecture Series. Welcome to Lecture 4. In this lecture, we are going to study about literature study and standards in residential design. I am architect Mansha Samreen, Associate Professor from K.R. Mangalam University, Gurugram. So learners, let's begin on this journey of understanding literature study and standards of residential design, why it is important and how it is implemented in the design process. So what is literature study? A literature study is an overview of existing literature, that is, the existing standards may be spatial and anthropometrical, the norms, regulations and laws drawn by empirical researches, experiences and other sources. A literature study is an overview of overall literature that is already available to us. The spatial standard, that means how the layout is done, the anthropometrical data that we have discussed in the lecture number 2, the norms and regulations we are going to discuss today, and we will understand how these empirical researches help the designers and the architects to come to a decent layout of the overall design for a residential. So, we will be keeping the scope only to the residential aspects of the norms, regulations and standards, as the focus of this lecture series is residential design only. So, literature study is basically the collection of universal data, the standards, the design and the purpose of the function that is going to happen in that particular design process. With a literature study, you will gather information about your topic, including the sources used by others who have previously worked on that design area. It gives you the knowledge for the lifetime. The main fact about literature study is collection of universal data pertaining to the project needs and requirements depending on purpose and the function. The stages of literature study are divided into 3 important parameters. First is the problem formulation, which we have already discussed in the previous session. Second is the literature research. Third is the data evaluation. Whatever literature you are going to study, you are going to gather, the data from that literature needs to be evaluated so that the proper analysis and interpretations can be made. The parameters of literature study are all the relevant data that are required to design a residence. That means for how many people, that is the user need, the anthropometric data, the spatial standards, what are the requirements of the regulatory bodies that has to be fulfilled and complied to, the security and safety norms and the standards which has to be implemented in all the design process. So, all the 6 points has to be taken care when the literature study is being worked out. So, when we are starting with the understanding of the requirements for how many people, we need to understand what are their requirements, what are the number of users. The space requirements will vary with the occupancy. For example, a residential bathroom is usually a single user versus the public restroom in a mall is a multi-user. So, in a house you will not give more than the number of washrooms than the number of people that are going to use it. But in say a mall or a hotel or a hospital, the common spaces or the public spaces which are multi-user will have a more number of restrooms, more number of WC, more numbers of wash basins. So, user needs and characteristics are also should be taken care of. For example, as we discussed in the second lecture of anthropometry, that height, the levels, the sizes vary depending upon the user needs. So, in a children's library, the shelf height would be much lower than the shelf height of an adult or a grown up library. The accessibility and the safety all needs to be taken care of. Impacts on size and layout. Occupancy and user needs directly influence dimension, circulation and spatial organization. Anthropometrical data such as age group, size, dimensions all need to be taken care of. Different age groups have different spatial requirements, and physical capabilities and the size and dimensions of a space should be adjusted accordingly. Spatial standards are maximum minimum sizes of spaces, space hierarchy, interlinking of these spaces, scale, everything has to be taken care of. The regulatory bodies which gives the norms, standard, regulations and building bylaws again forms an important part of the literature study. Safety and security norms such as fire safety, access control, earthquake safety and evacuation needs to be taken care of. The standards such as parking, acoustics, lighting and ventilation along with the orientation again forms an important part of these guidelines and literature reviews. So, from where to get all these documents, from where to get source all these information. So, the literature sources are an important sources which are books, magazines, manuals, codes and the building bylaws. Books which give the standards are usually referred in architectural and design practices such as the time saver standards and Newfort's code, and the codes and the bylaws are all again it's of the national level. It is the national building code, the state levels Haryana building bylaws, Delhi building bylaws and different type of magazines and manuals. So, the literature sources which are important, first we will be discussing books and magazines. Books such as time saver standards, the Newfort's, Francis D.K. Ching, all these books have already information about the standard size and the spatial requirement of the residence. When you will open this book, you will find different chapters. So, you can open the chapter of residential design and get all the standards of the spaces such as the bedroom spaces, the kitchen spaces, the drawing room spaces, the washroom spaces, all the requirements that you need can be easily accessed from these types of books. Another important source for literature are the building codes. So, National Building Code 2016 is a very relevant source from which you can get all the information and the standards practices of design, which is the site selection, the architectural design practices, the construction, the materials, the services, so fire and life safety services, plumbing and sanitation requirement details, electrical systems and environmental sustainability. So, these book gives the national guidelines of the requirement of the various codes, standards and practices. However, these norms and the practices are something which are given by the local building bylaws. Building bylaws are the factors which the architects, the designers have to keep in mind while working on the designs, because these sources give us the bylaws, norms and standards. Norms such as sizes, what size of plot is enough for what type of building, the sizes of the plot decides the size of the setbacks, how much setbacks has to be left, maximum building height, floor area ratio, parking requirements and fire safety measures. So, these regulations are given by zoning, development of the infrastructure and overall environmental requirements. So, size means the size of the plot, what is the area of the plot along with the dimensions, that is the length plus breadth of the plot. Setback is something which is to be left from the all or the four sides of the sites. So, setback is something which is another important norm and has to be checked from the local building bylaws. For example, in Delhi, Delhi building bylaws is followed, in Haryana, Haryana building code is followed. So, all these building bylaws are local building bylaws, and if you do not find the data in these local building bylaws, you need to refer to the national building code for the details of these datas. Maximum building height is again a developmental control norm which is given by these sources. How much maximum height can you develop in a particular area. It is again given by these norms. Next is the floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is the how much area can be totally built up on a particular site. 100% site cannot be built in case of bigger sites. In case of smaller site, 100% sites can be built. We will discuss on all these requirements one by one in coming slides. So, literature study of a residence design goes through important aspects of identifying the spatial requirement, which comes through the client need, what are his requirement, then correct organization of spaces, that means which space has to be kept where, and good organization of spaces will lead to a better spatial solution and will help you to make a better layout, and the relationship between the spaces has to be taken care of, and overall the relative importance of spaces have to be given enough coverage. For example, if you are doing a residence layout, so bare minimum requirement is a living space, the kitchen space and the dining space along with the toilets and the washroom. So, the living space is the action space where everybody is sitting, everybody will come. So, this becomes basically a semi public or a semi private area. Bedrooms become the very private zone, and the main bedroom is the retreat for the user. So, depending upon what are the user need and the requirement, these spaces has to be aligned. Then comes the services area like your garage, your studio or the laundry space, maybe the service balcony, the utility area which is supported by the kitchen. So, all these spaces need to be put in such an order that they do not contradict each other. So, if you are entering into a house, you will never see a washroom at the front porch because that is a service area. So, a welcoming house will always have a nice entry foyer along with a nicer living room which connects you to the semi private areas such as your dining area, and then the private areas come which are your bedrooms and the private area corners. So, the literature study of the design, when you are doing it, first you need to understand what is a residence. So, we all know residence is a home, it is a house. A residence is a place, normally it is a building used as a home or a dwelling. So, for the literature study of the design, we need to understand what are the spaces that are part of the house. So, it starts from the very basic bedroom, kitchen, dining area, living area or hall or a lobbying area, a dressing room, bathroom, water closets, washing area, drying area. Obviously, when if you have multiple levels, you will be giving staircase with a good headroom. There would be green and an outer space if the area permits, a porch, a veranda, a terrace, a balcony, a storeroom, laundry and parking. So, out of all these spaces, areas that are listed here, depending upon the user need, we identify which is the primary area, which is the secondary area and which is the tertiary area. Primary area means that those spaces have to be incorporated. A house will not function without a bedroom, it will not function without a kitchen, it will not function without a dining, it will not function without a living. But it can function without a separate laundry room, it can function without a separate balcony, it can function without a dedicated parking space. So, as designers we need to understand what is the actual requirement of the overall residence design and what your user or the owner aspirations are. So, alignment of the requirement with the alignment of the aspirations of the user, availability of the site area and availability of the resources that are working, these are important for you to see. So, once we have all the list available, we again need to go through this iterative process that are we missing anything? have we not left anything for the overall area design? So, again it becomes an iterative process where you work out the details of anything if it is missing or not. The gaps built or left by the literature study is fulfilled by multiple and relevant case studies. So, these case studies are again your part of the latest researches, the best practices and the real life design experiences. So, now learners, we will move ahead to the norms and the building bylaws. So, norms and the building bylaws are basically terms and terminologies related to rules for construction. These are the standards, norms, regulations, bylaws and the laws that the state has already dictated. So, standards refers to fixed and established rule. Norms refers to authoritative standard and known as norms. Regulations are prescribed orders, they are known as the regulations. The laws of the local authority are called the bylaws and the rules of the state are called the laws. So, why do we need these bylaws? So, planning regulations and the building bylaws are important to follow. If no proper bylaws are implemented, then the following problems arise: irregular and narrow roads, frequent traffic problems, creation of noise and nuisances, problem in the development of services like water supply, drainage, telephone, fire and electricity, poor lighting and ventilation and lack of recreational facilities. All of these factors are very important to be taken care of when we are working with the need of these bylaws. So, building codes are something which needs to be followed for all the design processes. They cannot be left untouched. A building code is a document containing standardized requirement for the design and construction of most types of the buildings. The purpose of all these building code is to ensure the public safety, health and welfare as affected by building construction. It includes structural strength, sanitary equipment, light and ventilation and fire safety. So, all these aspects are very important when building codes are understood. National Building Code, very fondly referred as NBC by the architects and the designers. It is a single document in which the information containing various Indian standards is woven into a pattern of continuity with interdependent requirements of sections carefully analyzed and fitted into make the whole document a continuous one. The National Building Code gives us all the important data pertaining to the bylaws and the standard building practices. So, what are bylaws now? Bylaws, a building bylaw is a local law framed by the local authority. It channelizes to achieve the concept and policies outlined in the master plans of the city. In order to give a particular architectural character to the city, these bylaws are made. So, building bylaws are defined as the standards and specification designed to grant minimum safeguards to the workers during construction, to health and comfort of the users and to provide enough safety to the public in general. The regulation sets out the basic requirements to be observed in the design and construction of the building. They are applied to new buildings and also to the extensions, material alteration and certain changes of the use of existing buildings. These building bylaws are framed by the local town planning authorities such as DDA, BMC, etc. It lays down the rules for building safety and use during construction and occupancy such as DDA and BMC. They lay down the ground rule for building safety and the standard. The central government has framed model building bylaws and the model building bylaws of 2016 are just not binding to the states but all over India. So, bylaws are very important because without the bylaws the development will be in a very haphazard manner. It is very important to make sure that the new construction, addition, alteration, demolition has all follows the building bylaws. So, students, today we have discussed all the parameters of the bylaws. In our upcoming lecture, we will talk about each of these bylaws in further detail, so that all the understanding of application and implementation of the bylaws are taken into your practices. So, thank you students for your time today. Let's meet in our next lecture for the bylaws to be dealt in the detail. Thank you.